This is Morning Edition on KUNC. I'm Erin O'Toole. In southern Colorado, a battle over a proposed high-voltage transmission line is dividing environmentalists and putting the future of large-scale solar power development in limbo. The story highlights how layered and tricky solar development may be in a so-called clean energy economy. KUNC's Kirk Sigler reports as part of our new series examining what's standing in the way of clean energy going mainstream.
This construction site here in the San Luis Valley in southern Colorado is a good place to start our clean energy series. I'm standing where a 17-megawatt solar power farm is being built. It's actually adjacent to an existing solar farm that generates about 8 megawatts of power. Most of it goes to the Front Range. And with an average of about 340 days of sun every year, it's not surprising that the San Luis Valley is sort of ground zero for solar power development in the state, if not the West.
If you look on any map where it talks about sunshine and solar, we're the target.
Darius Allen is an Alamosa County commissioner. He's also a local farmer. Potatoes have long been this valley's cash crop, but as water supplies dwindle, Allen says solar power production could be a big part of this area's future. Companies like the reliable sun and high altitude, which means less ozone pollution. And that might explain why Allen and his fellow commissioners have approved 3 large developments lately, and 6 more applications are pending.
You know, if you look at a project on 250, 260 acres, they're going to spend a couple of $100 million. Well, that's quite a shot in the arm for us down here in the valley.
A shot in the arm because this is one of the poorest parts of Colorado. But some think the industry here could be a whole lot bigger.
The real big stumbling block right now is getting the transmission built. It's certainly curtailing, for the short term anyway, significant development of renewable resources, particularly solar in the San Luis Valley.
That's Xcel Energy spokesman Mark Stutz. His company, along with Tri-State, wants to build a high-voltage power line connecting the southern Front Range with the valley. More transmission lines means more green power, which means Xcel can meet an increased state renewable energy standard.
We'll meet that mandate, but what's really in doubt right now is specifically the questions of how and where.
That's because construction of the transmission line has been delayed due to mounting local opposition, much of it led by a wealthy landowner whose ranch lies smack in the path of the proposal.
You're right at the top of La Vida Pass here. This is Trinchera Ranch, but it's really, it's Colorado.
Cody Wirtz is the spokesman for Trinchera, and its billionaire hedge fund managing owner Louis Bacon, who rarely talks to the press. Bacon bought the ranch from the Forbes family 3 years ago.
He's a conservationist, and he purchased this as another conservation property with the intention to one day place another 88,000 right in their acres under conservation easement.
So the utility companies are proposing to use eminent domain to build their power lines through the ranch. But Wirtz says Louis Bacon has proposed several viable alternative routes. One is along an existing transmission corridor.
This is billionaire NIMBYism. At the end of the day.
That's Mark Stutz again. He says Xcel's route is the most cost-effective, and it's the shortest. Citing uncertainties over the line's future construction, this month Xcel scaled back on plans to add more solar power to its renewable energy mix.
This is probably as large a landowner as you'll see in this country who has a not-in-my-backyard attitude toward this.
But it isn't just billionaires fighting the line. In fact, you'll find similar opposition in this valley from a whole separate and loud contingent of Birkenstock-clad back-to-the-landers.
This is KRZA 88.7 FM, Alamosa de Taos, community radio for the Upper Rio Grande region. I'm joined today by Joy Hughes, the founder of Solar Panel Hosting.
Joy Hughes is a well-known opponent of the Xcel line in local media. She lives off the grid with solar panels on her roof, and she thinks Coloradans should get their solar power like she does, or from community solar gardens, and not from far-flung rural places like this.
It's what we call a tragedy of the commons. It's most profitable for any single company to put their power plant in here, but it's better for the whole state if they're all over the place.
Now, Hughes worries industrial-scale solar power will eat up precious farmland and be an eyesore for tourists who flock to the Great Sand Dunes National Park.
They're using the same tactics and the same laws as the gas companies were. It feels like an extractive project.
Statements like those highlight just how difficult bringing solar power into the mainstream is in Colorado and across the West. Debate over the Xcel project has sharply divided environmentalists across the state.
We can't do any energy development without there being some impact. That's just impossible.
In Boulder, Gary Graham, the transmission director for the environmental firm Western Resource Advocates, says rooftop solar is great, but he says it won't put a dent in fighting climate change.
Front Range is a huge market for energy, period. You can't meet that demand and retire dirty sources of electricity without identifying some place to do utility scale generation.
And in the San Luis Valley, at least one of those utility scale projects is going forward, despite the uncertainty over new transmission lines.
You can obviously see where we are right now. There's just not a lot here.
Jeff Freeman, a vice president with Cogentrix Energy, is standing in a field where his company hopes to build a 30-megawatt solar plant. The North Carolina-based firm used to be in the oil and gas business.
It's kind of a new age direction for us as a company. And we're really excited to try to help push this technology to the forefront.
If all goes as planned, construction should begin here later this year. And Freeman says there's enough room on the existing grid for this project to move ahead, but he says the same may not be said for other companies down the road if Xcel's project remains in limbo. For KUNC, I'm Kirk Sigler.
In the wake of the Gulf oil disaster, President Obama is calling for a different energy strategy.
The time to embrace a clean energy future is now.
For Mr. Obama, part of that future hinges on nuclear energy. The climate bill Congress could take up as soon as this week includes incentives for the construction of more nuclear power plants. But nuclear power's role in a so-called clean energy economy remains bitterly controversial. Just getting the uranium out of the ground to fuel nuclear reactors is creating a battle in uranium-rich Colorado. As part of our series examining some of the roadblocks to clean energy, KUNC's Kirk Sigler takes us to the site of a massive proposed uranium mine in northern Colorado's Weld County.
PowerTech USA CEO Richard Clement says we're at the cusp of a nuclear power renaissance. There's just one thing standing in the way: us.
People have a misunderstanding about uranium and nuclear power in general, and people conceive of uranium being a major radioactive substance where if you just become associated with it, you're going to be irradiated and killed.
Clement says this is perpetuated in the movies and TV. Take this clip from the show 24.
I hear there are materials for sale. Expensive materials, dangerous ones.
Talk straight. What materials?
Nuclear rods, highly enriched uranium.
Those nuclear rods were headed for a power plant, but were intercepted by a terrorist who then dies from exposure to uranium.
Makes for good TV.
But Clement says that physically can't happen. Nuclear fuel does release tiny poisonous particles called alphas, but he says they can't penetrate air beyond 12 inches around them. This sounds comforting since we are driving on a dirt road atop a uranium deposit of more than 9 million pounds. Now, for the past several years, PowerTech has wanted to deploy an increasingly popular process called in situ to recover it. A fire hose of water would be injected a couple hundred feet below us to break up the uranium and pump it back to the surface.
People just don't understand what we're trying to accomplish here, and really it's a very non-invasive type development.
Now, just a couple of miles away from the proposed uranium mine is the small town of Nunn, Colorado. I'm standing here in the center of town underneath a huge water tower, and on that water tower are the words, "Watch Nunn Grow."
And then we got to thinking about the water tower in Nunn, and so we said, well, we don't want to watch Nunn glow. And that's how we actually came up with our bumper stickers. We did a "Hell No, We Won't Glow" bumper sticker also.
Robin Davis runs a small horse ranch adjacent to the proposed mine. She likes to evoke images of earlier battles waged against nuclear power when fighting the mine.
I know that the industry says, oh, you're creating a fear factor. Well, you know, the reality is that it is scary to think about having things in your water. And if people can latch on to, you know, "Hell no, we won't glow, we don't want to watch Nunn glow," it's about marketing, really.
Davis is actually more worried about groundwater contamination than she is radiation exposure. And history is on her side. During the last uranium mining boom in the 1970s, open-pit mining sickened workers, and poisonous byproducts like arsenic polluted some rivers and drinking water supplies across the Southwest. KK DeVivier is a retired geologist who teaches environmental law at the University of Denver.
Undoubtedly, I think that any uranium mine right now has a problem because of some of the past record.
Colorado environmental officials appear poised to make sure those things won't happen again, as uranium mining appears poised for a comeback. The state is currently rewriting regulations to protect groundwater from toxic runoff. That could be one more roadblock in front of President Obama's push for more nuclear power, but State Department of Natural Resources spokesman Teo Stein says the intent is not to stop uranium mining, but make sure it's done safely.
Groundwater in that part of the state is precious and limited, and it's appropriate to make sure that any industrial activity does not adversely impact that groundwater.
I think the regulation should be strict, but I don't think that they should try to drive this company out of the state.
DU's KK DeVivier says that is a concern in the case of PowerTech, especially as things have been delayed while the new uranium rules are written. DeVivier says companies around the U.S. are beginning to show that new technologies will allow uranium to be mined safely with a minimal footprint. Nuclear power, along with natural gas, are often billed as clean-burning fuels that can be brought online when the wind stops blowing or the sun shining. And make no mistake, nuclear energy advocates like PowerTech's Richard Clement are mobilizing their PR machines.
Nuclear power is the cleanest method of generating electricity that exists. It does not generate SO2. It does not generate CO2. It is essentially emission-free.
But at least for now, that pitch continues to be met with skepticism from a lot of people living near PowerTech's proposed mine, not to mention southwest Colorado, where a similarly bitter fight is occurring over a proposed uranium mill. Back in Nunn, residents like Joe Bagby question just how clean nuclear is, especially since you have to mine the uranium and then store the radioactive waste.
We had hundreds of thousands of wells in the Gulf of Mexico that weren't a problem either, and they're now a problem. So it just takes the one Chernobyl.
Still, Bagby says he thinks the mine will happen anyway, because he says it's a top-down push from President Obama, a push that may get more of a boost in Colorado and nationwide in light of the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. For KUNC, I'm Kirk Sigler.